Hello everyone, happy Wednesday. I really hope you can hear me today because I have been getting some feedback that my phone is not performing very well. So if you cannot hear me, please let me know, give me a little heads up so I'm not having to re-record. But today's topic of conversation is actually super close to my heart because it's all about the question that comes up for all of us so often, which is, I know how in my mind how things need to go and I know what needs to happen, but for some reason like success just eludes me. Like I'm still not getting what I need to get out of the situation. I'm still not getting the job that I want. I'm not getting the date that I want. I'm not having the marriage that I want. I'm not having the money that I want. I'm not having the happiness that I want. So for some reason it's like elusive, even though you may know on paper what you need to do, or you think you know, but you've been trying, but it's not working. And that kind of feeling of just being blocked as opposed to feeling like in a state of flow. So in this conversation with all of us, I want to talk about being in a state of flow versus being blocked. And the reason I want to talk about that is because that is being in your power. That's self-actualization. That's when all the how-tos in the world kind of are irrelevant, because you are just so intuitively understanding what you need to do next in order to make your goals and your vision come into fruition, if that makes sense. And I want to get really clear because this is something that I personally have and do struggle with all the time. And there is definitely a continuum for like how much we struggle with being in our power. Some of us are so locked in to being in disempowerment that we're actually attached to it. And then some of us are so connected to our power that sometimes it does sneak up on us being blocked, but then we're able to rectify it. So let me just get really clear what I mean, okay? A perfect metaphor for this that I just thought about today when I was talking to a few wonderful people is walking. When you're in a state of flow, you know how to walk. You just start doing it. You put one foot in front of the other. You're an adult. You've been doing it for years. Obviously, if you have a disability, it's a different story, but I'm talking about for someone who doesn't. Walking is being in a state of flow, putting one foot in front of the other. It's intuitive. You don't have to think about it anymore. You're on autopilot. When you're blocked, it's sort of like having all the instructions that you need to walk, but because it like nothing is kind of happening easily, you're just in this state of being blocked. So it feels really unnatural. And like you're like following directions, but like the walking feels weird. That's the difference between being in a state of flow versus being in a blocked state. That's the difference. And if you're trying to make more money, have more influence and impact, have more happiness, have more love, you're not going to be able to accomplish if you're feeling blocked, even if you have the 37 steps you need to do to accomplish it, because the issue is internal. It's a mindset, it's a feeling. So let's just get really clear on what it means to be blocked versus what it means to be in a state of flow. And I'm just going to read you a few things that I jotted down. Okay. So first of all, if you're in a state of being blocked, everything feels risky and you're playing really small. When you're in a state of flow, you feel safe and you're playing full out and you're taking bold moves, but you're not feeling like, fearful. It's coming from a good place. It's coming from a place of like, I can do this, as opposed to feeling like disconnected from what you're doing. Another example of being in flow versus being blocked. You feel self-actualized versus seeking validation, okay? My next video really needs to be about seeking validation because it comes up so often. But the idea is that we're constantly trying to seek feedback from people, verbal or non-verbal, that we're good enough, that we're doing well, that we're powerful. And that is a state of being blocked. When we're completely connected to our own self-actualization, just creating in this world what we were meant to create, that's being in a state of flow. It's the antidote to being blocked and seeking validation. The other one is like trying to do things on someone else's terms versus doing things on your terms because you want to. And we are so scared to do that. But at the same time, if we don't do that, we won't be sustaining our goal. We'll be inconsistent, we'll fail people, we'll be mistrustful, and people won't trust us. We have to live and function on our own terms. So I don't want to go too far into it, but there's a lot of examples that I can offer you of what it looks like to be in a state of flow versus being in a state of being blocked, okay? I think the biggest takeaway is just like, you're leaving so much on the table if you're not in a state of flow. You're leaving so much love on the table for yourself. You're leaving so much good feeling and happiness on the table. You're leaving so much money, clients, whatever it is you're trying to do, impact in terms of like breadth of how many people you could impact, and depth in terms of influence that you can have. So the idea of being in a state of flow is really critical if you don't want to be leaving all these incredible resources out there for you not to capitalize on, okay? So I want to tell you guys, yesterday I was in a state of being blocked, and as much as I do to work on my own state of being in flow and supporting others being in a state of flow, and I have a 90-day breakthrough program that's all about being in a state of flow, essentially. Like, that's ultimately the goal. I definitely it speaks to my absolute soul when I'm in a state of being blocked, because that's where the whole program came from. That's how all the solutions and support that I can serve other people came from, is that I needed to do this for myself. So why was I blocked yesterday? On paper, yesterday should have been a great day. My children went back to school for the first time after a few days yesterday, so there was nobody to, have their needs met. Like, I could just focus on working and getting what I needed to get done, right? I had set up some client calls. I had a few wonderful, inspiring conversations with new people in my world. I had scheduled time. This is like my biggest luxury thing. And people, who go to the gym and go to get, their hair done and all that kind of stuff, that's really important for self-care. But for me, in addition to that stuff, self-care looks like scheduling time where I can think, just thinking time, just writing time, just strategizing time. That is, for me, the definition of luxury. So I had scheduled that. So everything yesterday should have been absolutely in a state of flow. I had set myself up to have a state of flow, and yet I was blocked. And I'm going to tell you why, but I'm going to just wait a second to tell you, because I want to get to a little bit of the punchline before I tell you why I was blocked. One thing about the anatomy of being blocked is that once you do get blocked, every little thing that should flow through you nicely blocks after that one big thing. Like, think about like pipes. If one thing is standing in the way of a pipe, if one thing is blocking a pipe, all the stuff that needs to come through the pipes is going to get blocked up with it. So the anatomy of you being blocked is that you're going to feel overwhelmed if you don't take care of what's blocking you. Okay? I want to tell you the coolest 3 rules. Take out your pens and papers. This is so good. 3 rules of the mind, okay? 3 massive foundational points of the mind that if you can really understand this, and I don't just mean intellectually, if you can own this information, these 3 pieces of the mind, of how the mind works, the rules of the mind, the rules that the mind plays by, you can beat your mind at its own game, and you can like win at life. I'm not even kidding. So the 3 rules are, number 1, what we focus on, we find. Every single time you focus on something, every single time a thought comes into your mind, whether you realize the thought is in there or not. So you walk by another person and they make you there's something about what they say or what they do or just who they are that triggers a thought in your mind. That thought has the potential to be incredibly empowering, or it has the potential to block you. So what you focus on, you find. If you have a thought in your mind that's starting to block you, you're going to suddenly look for all the different things in your life that will also block you. What you focus on, you find. That's rule number 1 of how the mind works. So the antidote is obviously the more you can focus on the good, the more you're going to find the good. But that's not necessarily our natural way of being always. So rule number 1, what you focus on, you find. Number 2, you create your belief about something, and then that belief creates you. If your belief is, I'm inconsistent, if your belief is, I'm always failing, if your belief is, I'm too complicated for anybody to help me, then you will continue to play out that belief. If your belief is, I should be having X, Y, and Z, but I just can't because ABC, that's your belief. You will either be made by your beliefs or you will be broken by your beliefs. But your mind, that's rule number 2 of your mind. Number 1 is what you focus on, you find. Number 2 is you make your beliefs and then they make you. And then the last rule of the mind, number 3, is the mind avoids the unfamiliar, and it always wants to return back to the familiar. What you make familiar, the mind is going to return to. What you make unfamiliar, the mind is going to resist. So when you feel resistance to something, like strong resistance, that could be your mind setting off alarms to protect you, saying, I don't want this is unfamiliar, but it's actually not serving you. So you might say, I don't want to get help from so-and-so. This doesn't feel good to me, but actually this person might actually be able to offer you something that you didn't realize you needed, or help you unblock something that you didn't realize needed to be unblocked. So the idea is that when you avoid the unfamiliar, you're protecting yourself, and that's what your mind is there to do. It's to help you emotionally and mentally survive living. But actually that protection does not serve you at all. So number 1 is what you focus on, you find. Number 2 is you make your beliefs and then they make you. And then number 3 was avoid the unfamiliar, return to the familiar every single time. And that's, by the way, why you see people repeating their own history, like their own family history of relationships, or how to live in terms of, what they create financially for themselves, what they create in relationships for themselves, how happy they are. You're going to see a lot of inheriting. We give inheritance to our children that we intend to, like that pretty ring that you want to give over to the next of kin. But the things that you don't intend to give over, you end up doing if you don't understand these 3 rules really deeply, because your mind is going to keep going back to the familiar, and how a child is wired is to continue to go back to the familiar of what they're used to. Okay, so now let me get to the punchline of which is how to get to the healing part, the antidote, how to get into your power, how to get out of your block and get into your flow. And this is going to come back to my day yesterday. So there are 3 ways to be transitioning from blocked to flow. There are 3 ways to get into your power. Number 1 is preventative, which doesn't sound very proactive, but actually it is the most proactive, because it's essentially every single day making the choice to feed yourself, nourish yourself with empowering ideas, people who make you feel empowered, and just like a steady diet of that. The same way that having a strong body is going to require you to have a steady diet of nutritious food and healthy exercise every single day, or 80% of the time, you're going to need 80% of the time to intentionally create an environment for yourself where you're consuming really nourishing, empowering thoughts from empowering people and empowering ideas and empowering opportunities. So you need to surround yourself with that. That's being proactive, okay? Most of us cannot sustain that every single day. I know I cannot. I do a lot of it, but I know that I'm going to fall short, and I need another plan. So number 1 is that proactive approach. Number 2 is the medicine. Okay? If you're sick, you need to take medicine, right? So what is the medicine? What do I mean by medicine? Medicine is something that's uncomfortable, like there's a side effect that you don't really like, but it is the very thing that you need to do. A medicine can be a tool that someone offers you. This is where coaching is actually super helpful, because you might not be able to see something and someone else can see it for you. It's an exercise that you need to do, whether it's physical or mental or whatever it is. It's a powerful story that you need to hear. It's something that makes you uncomfortable, because that's the side effect. There's always a side effect with medicine. And the side effect with this medicine is it's going to make you uncomfortable in some way, but it's also going to be healing. So you need to go and do that tool. You need to go and do that exercise. You need to go and put that story that you heard into practice. That's the medicine. And then the last final thing, ultimate way to be in your power, and then I want to tell you 2 really cool case studies, is the most invasive and painful, which is surgery. It could also be like just burning through that resistance. And how do you burn through resistance? You can see my last video, which talks about that, about getting unblocked more. But the essential idea is you have to feel it deeply and let it flow through you completely. Like feel it so deeply. And we're in such a pain-averse, conflict-averse, we're set up to be, we want to avoid pain and avoid conflict so much that we contract and get really tight, and we hold, and it ends up that we inadvertently hold on to pain and hold on to conflict. And the idea is you have to feel these things so deeply that it just goes right through you, doesn't block up the pipes. So I'm going to give you, and just to remind you, yesterday I was blocked. Okay. How was I blocked? The truth is, when I really analyze why I was feeling blocked, I could give you a zillion reasons. And I did. I started thinking about all the different ways that I got blocked. But actually, the first thing that happened when I really slowed down the day was that the night before, I kept listening on like I kept playing back a couple of songs that were sad songs, and they're beautiful, beautiful songs. I'm not even going to tell you guys what they are because I don't want you to listen to it and get sad and then get blocked. But I'll just say music is amazing because it can completely get you in touch with your feelings, which is a critical thing. But it's only going to help heal you if after you get in touch with your feelings, you let yourself feel it so deeply that you can release it. But if you're going to just circle the drain and keep coming back to it and tighten your grip to the pain, we identify so strongly with our pain sometimes that it actually becomes who we are, that we're no longer willing to let go. We're not willing to just let ourselves completely feel something uncomfortable until we can let it go and release it. And that's how I got blocked yesterday, even though it should have been a day of flow. I have 2 awesome easy case studies for you guys that literally happened today, and I'm sure I could think of a zillion more if I really go back in my memory. But I had 2 great conversations with 2 very powerful people today, and that's just so far. So actually technically I had a conversation with 4 people, but these 2 are the ones that I want to talk to you about. They're both, in both cases, they're both people who are entrepreneurs who are selling a service, and they want to have clients, and they want to have a thriving business, and they want to be able to do their genius thing that they do in a way that's going to serve other people, impact other people, and that they're going to be able to monetize. Okay. In the first person's case, he was really frustrated because he felt like he was creating all of these amazing relationships and impacting all of these people and supporting them and helping them, and yet he was not able to monetize. He wasn't able to propose an offer to them that they were going to then accept and pay him for. And after some conversation, what turned out to be the case was that he actually had nourished the relationships just as he said he had, to the point that people were waiting for him to propose. They were, imagine, someone at a restaurant waiting for her beloved to propose to her or him. But he was so quickly skating past that person after he nourished the relationship beautifully to the next person and the next thing and the next group and the next person and the next group and the next person and the next group. And he ended up having all of these relationships that he had completely overserved. And he probably felt kind of resentful, even like, hey, what's in it for, like, how are my needs being met right now? And really what was going on was there were all these rooms he had created, all these spaces of people who were waiting for him to propose. And he just hadn't slowed down enough to start the proposals. And that's where having a coach comes in so handy, because someone can actually slow you down and help you dial into what you're missing. In person number 2's case, also an entrepreneur, also looking to have this beautiful business of creating a service for others and monetizing off of it. He knew he had the chops to perform, and he knew that once he was able to be with someone, talking in conversation with them, he could get them to, he could close the deal, and he could be in service of them, and he could really help them, and he could really create for them something beautiful and transformational in their business. And his point of frustration was, he described this visual in such a perfect way. He said it was like being at a bar and not knowing how to start a conversation with someone, and he just didn't know what to do. And after some talking around his feeling and going into it more, it turned out that